Welcome back. I'm Boomer X, and this is,
Millennial Z.
yes, and this is podcast number 3. And today we're talking about victim blaming and victim shaming, which is a very hot topic for this YouTube and social media and just society in general. It seems people are taking real umbrage to the fact that other people are doing it, and other people are taking umbrage to the fact that they think that they're doing it and they're really not. And it's closely related to our previous topic, our first podcast of personal responsibility, but certainly not the same thing. And so, what do you think about it?
You want to give the definition first, or you want me to give the definition?
Yeah, you give the definition, and I'll get it. Mine's pretty simple.
Okay, so we'll do victim blaming first. On the general, this isn't verbatim, obviously. I'm off the top of my head. Victim blaming is somebody being in a crime or in some type of victim state where they got assaulted or, you know, RPE'd or something terrible happened to them, and they tell their story, and somebody says, well, why didn't you do these things differently so this didn't happen to you? Why were you in this state of mind and in this area at this time when you knew you shouldn't have been? They don't,
Right. Well, I think that's certainly an example of that. I go with my definition. Of course, I go to the objective one that everybody's agreed to. First, you have to define what a victim is to even get into the second. That a victim is someone that has suffered some sort of harm,
mhm,
regardless of degree, whether it be small, could be an injury, could be death, could be you financial loss, could be even face, reputation, or got their feelings hurt. That's a victim. You suffered some sort of harm, and blaming is you assigning the person who is the victim to that source of injury or harm, like it's solely upon them that it happened. And you know, that to me would be rare, but I think it would be possible, but it would be to assign 100% of the blame. But most of the time, I think people use it to virtue signal about how good of a person they are if they call out somebody else who's victim blaming. That I see now. Although I do think that victim blaming happens, and when it's real, meaning they're not a true victim, and you do that, it's reprehensible. But it, oftentimes, the person who's decided that they're a victim isn't really a victim of anything except their own devices, and they got caught out. Now, victim shaming would be you'd have to assign blame before you can shame them, right? So it's a separate thing, but closely related. Meaning, once you've decided that the victim's to blame, then you're shaming them for the victimhood, you know. But the shaming them is not really shaming them for being a victim. What you're doing is shaming them, I think, for claiming victimhood when they're clearly not, you know.
right.
So,
Well, that's the intent. It's the
right,
misuse that becomes the real
yeah.
problem, and
So I
how
think
often that
victim
happens.
shaming is a misnomer, and it's done intentionally to try to again get allow people to do something or be some way that's they shouldn't be. They're not a genuine victim. But it applies in so many ways, and it's especially called out now. I got to say, your generation is much kinder and nicer and looking out for people more than my generation as a rule. I think my generation is quick to point the finger, quick to make judgments, and quick to assign blame instantly to someone if they can, and then they just move on rather than try to find out really what the problem is. Now, I'm not saying everybody in my age group, but many. It's far more prevalent and far quicker in my age group as a boomer or as a Gen X. I think Gen X people became a lot more kinder, and then again in the millennial generation, and yet again in Generation Z, and you're right in the margin of both. So, and actually, I like it as a rule, but it's almost a game to see who can be more kind. And if you're not,
Yes.
yeah, and that's crazy. And when one of those casualties is everybody's a victim. And so that means nobody's responsible for their own actions. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah,
Everybody's
it
a child?
becomes super detrimental to the point where people are competing with one another for victimhood. It's becoming this,
Yeah,
as they
yeah,
have as the culture's victim totem pole of who can have the most victimhood to
yeah.
say I have the most
And
problems, so you
the
cannot say
biggest
anything to me.
victim is the biggest winner, in the game
Right.
of life, which is boggles my mind. And I think that's happened due to the way the political landscape has shifted over the decades, where rugged individualism is scoffed upon now. Like there's no such thing. Where indeed there's such a thing, but it is rare. That little mindset of I'm going to try to do what's better for me and make my own decisions, to be responsible is really what helps you get going. Not to say that everything's in your control. It's not. But what is, you try to take control of that and do it and realize that, while you're not to blame, perhaps you're responsible for moving forward because only you can move forward. Nobody can make you do it,
Well,
like,
yeah, I think that's the biggest detriment of, like I was saying, to us, of you saying we're more accepting, is also that friends or people who usually would help you and tell you like, hey, you're making mistakes here. I think they're afraid to say something because they don't want to be ostracized as seeing as victim shaming, or hey, you shouldn't have made those stupid mistakes. They don't just want to come out and say that because they don't seem
yeah.
like they want to be the bad person in any situation, even more now
And
than it would in the past.
that's unfortunate because that person's never going to grow and realize the
Right.
appropriate decisions to make for themselves, because they think they can just do whatever. And when something happens, it's always somebody else that did it rather than them, like, if I'll give you an example, and this is an 80s example, and I still um, gotten, I still angered some people very much. And I can see why, but at the time, I was a different person and I was pretty insensitive. So the reason I'm laughing about it is like I would never say that now, but I definitely did then. But for example, I was a group of friends of us were hanging out in the lakefront in Mandeville, and this guy came up that it was an acquaintance. I'd met him before. He was like a friend of a friend kind of deal. And then another friend had died 2 nights before, riding his bicycle, got run over on the highway. I'm like,
How old were
oh
y'all?
man, that's horrible. Yeah, horrible. And
Yeah.
then some more like, man, what happened? And the come to find out that the guy that died was run over. But here's the thing: it was the 80s. He was wearing dark clothes. He was on a small bicycle without reflectors because many bikes didn't have reflectors back then. At around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning in a rural area on the highway around a dead end curve, a 90-degree curve that he couldn't see the lights behind because he wasn't looking, he was just pedaling. And the person couldn't see him until he was on top of him. He'd come out. So the person made that curve, at 90, but it was a wide lane highway, and people frequently went onto the shoulder, but it was paved, even though it was rural in that particular area, just outside of town, and ran over him because they literally didn't see him. And I mentioned, I listened patiently. I asked some questions like, dude, I said, it's horrible that the guy got run over, but what what was he expecting? I mean, what was he doing there at 3 in the morning riding a bicycle? And come down find out later that he was drunk. He'd been drinking and decided to go for a bike ride. We were 18, 19 years old. He was 18, 19. You could drink then, but he definitely shouldn't have been around a highway. Definitely in a totally black area. No overhead lights, no street lights, no nothing. Wearing dark clothes on a small bicycle. He was grown, but he was wearing one of those old banana seat bicycles that didn't have any, and that bicycle was probably about 10, 12 years old then, but he could pedal it. He kept it up. He probably got that bike when he was 8. It was probably, and he kept it and he rode it in his little area. and he got run over, and there was no way the guy in the vehicle could have possibly seen him and stopped in time. He was in the dark, in around a curve, and the guy, you're driving, and the guy making the curve popped up, and the guy on the bike's right there. There's no way, especially a car from 1980, runs over a guy in 1984, with drum brakes all the way around. There's just no, and he's doing 45, 50. There's no way, coming out of, and like, okay, who's the victim? Is the guy who hit the guy who died is certainly a victim of the car getting run over. But the entire scenario, there's no way that car driver could have stopped, could have reasonably believed that anybody would have been there on a bicycle, and his car is destroyed. He killed somebody, now strictly by accident, but he did. He's got to live with that the rest of his life, a young guy, who was 18 years old. And that's going to weigh on his conscience. But everybody's talking about, the poor guy who got run over. And yeah, the poor guy who got run over. But I said, like, dude, what was he doing there? That's crazy. And immediately the guy jumped me, so because it was his best friend, and I put the blame on his death on the guy who died right there in front of him and didn't have, it was insensitive, but he wanted to throw down right there. And back then I'd be like, all right, let's go. I was okay. That's why I didn't mind saying it. Everybody else was thinking it. They told me later, but they weren't going to say anything. I'm like, I wasn't rude other than the fact I actually said it. I mean, I didn't do it. I was like,
that's what's called rude.
Yeah. That's the very definition of rude. But I didn't curse. I didn't I didn't disrespect him in any other way other than I was just. It came out of my mouth. My brain didn't stop it. There was no filter. Like, what was he doing there? And that's like the ultimate victim blame. He's dead. You can be no more of a victim than that.
Right.
But really, how can the guy who's driving the car be assigned any of that blame? Right. And of course, the police showed up and everybody was there and nobody was arrested. Not even a ticket was written. So they clearly saw there was nothing he could do either. It was an objective thing. And the kid was he was a good kid. I say kid, we didn't figure it because I was like 19, he was 18, and he was just old enough to drink. So he was. That's why he was out there pedaling a bicycle in a totally dark road with no lights around what they call, and it was literally Dead Man's Curve. That was the name of the curve because it was so sharp you couldn't see, and everybody went over the line, So and it's like, but that's the ultimate, like, who's the victim,
right.
Really, in as far as liability, and personal responsibility, in this issue. And it's horrible. And I still feel bad for saying it. I wish, because it was no good for saying that, but I wasn't trying to assign blame. It just came out. Like, I was just stunned that anybody would do that. And then I remember thinking, but didn't say it, like, obviously that was an option if you're out there, Of course he was impaired, he was drunk, but nobody held him down. He was by himself. He wasn't with anybody. He was alone. He just thought that was the thing to do on a week. It was a Friday night or Saturday night. I think it was a Friday night when it happened, and that Monday evening we were out there, on the lakefront talking. And I'm like, wow. But that's like an ultimate example of, victim blaming. Like, everybody did. The police, the fire department, the medics, all blame. Like, dude, there's no way, like it. And the thing is, what do you say,
By definition, it's victim blame, but at the same time, is it wrong to victim blame sometimes? That's really the question I'm trying to get after here, is because some people need to be told, hey, that was stupid. Like, hey, don't ride your bike in the middle of the night on some shady road drunk.
Right. Weird. Where nobody can see you in any way. Yeah,
right.
Nobody,
Hey, don't do that. That's really stupid.
Yeah. You're like, well, where was his parents? I can tell you, they were asleep. He was 18 years old, and 18 years old in 1984, 1985 is a different 18 years old in 2022. It's just, you were pretty much left alone unless you were a complete idiot back then when you were.
Well, and it's like, he has to be the example now, unfortunately. And
yeah, and I still feel bad about it. I mean, it's been it's been almost 40 years, and I still feel bad about saying that because it was I didn't need to. I mean, everybody was thinking it, but it was there, but it's still, the question is what in the world, was he doing? and that goes over into victim blaming for something else. Like I know some people victim blame, like we mentioned before, if somebody ends up being a junkie and then you call them out and nowadays nobody ends up blaming the junkie for being a junkie, pretty much. Nobody does. Like, man, you need help, we'll fix you. You got out of control. Everybody try. When I was a little kid, a junkie was like one of the worst things you could be called. And all blame was assigned to you. It was you had to seek it out because it was hard to find. You had to take it. You had to become addicted to it. You failed to stop. You failed to seek help. You probably also had to become a thief, lie to people to do it. And you got worse to continue your habit and become a junkie. So everybody, many parents kicked their kids out, and that was like the ultimate victim blame. They didn't care. You were a junkie. You knew you weren't supposed to be a junkie. They still enforced felony marijuana laws, in the early 70s back then. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it.
The good old days.
But that's what it was done, and I think that's what puts that sting on victim blaming now. Like, look what happened in the past when they did it and how horrible it was. But the thing of it is, if people still didn't think it was horrible, they would never try to rectify it. It would just continue,
right.
And like when I was a kid, all right, I'll take for example, fat shaming. That's one. And my best friends, to me, they're family, and they were overweight. Heck, I was overweight, when I was a kid, and people constantly made fun of them and shamed them for being overweight. Fat shame every day. You got to where it meant nothing to you. That's one thing. You build up a very thick elephantine skin, where people saying stuff, does it bother you? Sure, but you realize they're idiots, and they're meaningless to you. They're there just trying to torture you, so you pay no mind to them anymore. You learn. But the thing is, I'm sure it hurt because it was done to me. I didn't like it, but I thought nothing of them, so I didn't really care after a while. And when I say after a while, I'm like after the second time, I didn't care. I got over it real quick, but I wanted to help for myself, But the thing is, there is nobody, and they know it. Here's the thing: as a larger person, nobody's to blame other than yourself, unless you have a genuine medical issue. And I don't mean a genuine medical issue that arises out of your obesity. I mean one that directly caused it, and that's extremely rare, but it does happen. It does happen.
So that's where I would argue, and I think that's where it's also developing now, is people in our age group are understanding that a 9-year-old, it's not their fault if they're fat, it's their parents' fault, really. It's the habits they've taken on from the discipline they've learned from. It's the habits they've learned from their parents of,
right, and that's the truth. And that's
right.
the truth. But once you become a teenager, it gets turned up a few notches, because by then you have your own agency and you're supposed to be taking control of your life and not doing it. You know what I mean? So little kids are cruel things to each other. Nobody's meaner than a little kid to another little kid. And you know that, especially elementary school, kindergarten. They are rough. They're barbaric little creatures. So and it's hilarious once you realize they're just little kids. But if it's not in check, it can get out of hand. They grow into horrible adults. But yeah, as a teenager, they would do it, and they would fat shame. And the thing is, and they were doing that really because they didn't want to see it in themselves, and they were doing it to you. And trust me, in their mind, they weren't trying to help you. They were just getting their jollies off of messing with you.
Oh, sure.
But the thing is, they didn't want to. They were horrified that they might do it too. So they figured, man, I'm not doing it, so I'm going to shame you for doing it. But really, if you looked at it, like when I graduated high school, there might have been 4 to 5 overweight people in my entire graduating class of 400 people, roughly. That's 1%, approximately. Yeah. Now it's well over 50% from what I can see, at a graduating class.
And I say it's because there's not enough bullying anymore.
Yeah.
You get that bullying up.
Yeah. Bullies serve a purpose. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Nah, bull- yeah, bullies don't need to be eradicated, just regulated. Is that what you're saying?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. No,
We need at least a certain amount of bullies per classroom to make sure everybody
yeah.
gets in
There needs
line.
to be guidelines, though, right? No, that's no. Bullies are horrible. Here's the thing. I think everybody's been a bully, even subtly, like muttering something
Oh, sure.
horribly to somebody else under their breath, and they're like, well, they're the nicest people, but they know how to be a bully, like that passive aggressive stuff or something only one person can hear, and just horrible stuff that's out of thing. But no, I bullying is terrible behavior. I hope I've never done it, but I'm sure I have. If I thought about it, I'm sure I could come up with ways. Like I'm sure when you and your brother were little kids, y'all thought I was a bully, being stuff, but I was just trying to get y'all to be uh, responsible adults and think for yourself when you're older and not do things to get yourself or your brother killed, and things like that. Like don't do that. No, pick that up. No, you can't leave a plate under your bed for 2 months and not expect bugs. Like and hide it instead of just pick it up and put it in the sink. You hide it. It'd take more trouble to stuff it somewhere than it would be just to move it that kind of the usual kid stuff, but and
I
I
think most of
threatened
the
to,
bullying comes from a superiority complex of like, well, I'm better than you, so I get to pick on you because I feel like I'm better
yeah,
than you.
yeah, I think that's
For
certainly
most
some of it,
people,
and of course they definitely victim blame. They create victims, and then blame them for their own misery or
right?
something. But and then some of the, every dime store psychologist will, have a bully say they really have a deep sense of insecurity and they're using that and reversing it and putting it on the person in front of
I
them to
don't
show that
believe
they're
that
better,
every
but they're
time.
really not.
I
But
don't believe that every time. I believe there's just genuinely some people who just think, "Oh, I'm better than you, and I can get away with making fun of you, and I can get attention by making fun of you. So I'm going to keep
yeah,
doing it." You
I say
know?
I believe that. I do believe that, and I believe there's
Yeah,
some people who are just not good people, and they just get their
yeah,
jollies out of messing with others. And like, what are you going to do?
right.
And that's
That
their
too.
only sense of entertainment. Now,
Mhm.
do I think some people are insecure and they create that
Yeah,
thing where they bully others to feel better about themselves? Sure,
projecting on other people their insecurities, sure, but
exactly. But
yeah,
some psychological schools think that that's almost always the case, and I'm like,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah.
I do think there is value in bullying. I really do, even though it's a dark view on bullying. But like you said, fat shaming is one that I genuinely think it does serve its social pressures for people to stay in some type of shape. If it's not their own self, then at least the value of how other people view them will keep
Yeah, well, dude,
some type of
you're gonna
line.
elicit some hate for that for sure, and they're
And
gonna think,
it's a dark truth for sure. And
yeah,
I don't think there's any way that like this should be in here forever. I think there's a much better substitute for it, but I
yeah.
do
Like,
think it
so
has
how
its
many
own value
times do you
system.
get to call somebody a fatty, like to where it's not too much, right?
Right. Well,
Like
and
just
any
twice a day, yeah, only when they're eating.
I've never been the one to bully people, but I would like, you have
Yeah, I've
friends,
never
especially
seen you
me.
bully somebody.
No, when growing up, I would have the weird friends because I just didn't care about being the popular guy. So I would go sit down with the weird kids and we would talk and I would learn all type of stuff from them because they would just be into weird stuff. That's why they're the weird kids. And I end up being the weird kid with them because it just is what it is, you know?
Right,
But
right.
and I would talk to them like, "Hey man, like how'd you get up to this?" Because some of them be super skinny and I was super skinny growing up, or they'd be, super obese. And I'm like, "Hey man, how'd you get this way?" Because I'm super skinny and I know how much I eat. So how did you get, just being a kid and not understanding the real detriment to them talking about this because they're so insecure about it.
Right.
But I guess and that would be a substitute for bullying is people showing like they care and they want you to change for the better of you. Like, hey man, this isn't the way you should be living life.
Yeah, and I tried that with you because you were super skinny as a little
Yeah,
kid, and I continually tried to get you to eat, and you would
yeah.
like you'd use as a badge of honor the fact that you wouldn't do it. That's the sense I got. I don't know if I'm
This
right or wrong.
probably was. It was a little rebellion. I could get
Yeah,
a little win
yeah, we
somewhere. I
never
don't know.
talked about it, and I'm like, man,
I
just
don't know.
eat something, and you would not eat for like days, and then you'd get like weak and have to sit down. I'm like, you got to eat something, man. And I'd be genuinely worried and try not to show it, but I would be like panicking. And I knew all
I
you
don't
needed.
think it was for days. I think you're exaggerating.
One time
But
it was
I do remember
3 days.
not
I
eating
didn't know
much.
it. Yeah, I didn't know it until we talked a little bit. I'm like, you haven't eaten for 3 days, and you're like, yeah, that might be right. And I'm like, and I'm thinking in my mind, holy, what? So I'm like, what do you want? Anything, ice cream, like any heavy, anything. And I try to keep you away from the candy because I remember you being a little kid and you'd steal candy, hide under the kitchen table, under the chairs, and eat it. And that was all you would eat, and so I would just stop buying candy. After your mother and I split up, you'd stay a week with me and a week with her, and I got the impression she wasn't paying you any attention at all, and she never called me about it. So when you came to my house, I'd look at you and I'm like, I think he's gotten skinnier, and I'd be like, what do you want? So you like chicken nuggets, so I'd always make chicken tenders, or you like pizza, so we'd always have that kind of stuff. So I knew you'd eat something, but it was, yeah, it really bothered me for a long time. Then I saw you fatten up to like regular skinny instead of super skinny, and I felt better. And like maybe he's just going to be one, that kind of person. Um, but yeah, I
Yeah,
was,
I think it was a lot. It was, obviously my diet was the number one for sure, but also I just had a fast metabolism. I still have it to this day,
yeah,
and it's starting to finally slow down.
yeah, because you
But
reached your
and then I had a
27.
huge growth spurt. I'm 6'5" now, so I had
Yeah, you
insane
say
growth
six
spurts.
five, but I'm telling you, you're 6'6". I mean,
Yeah,
you stand
whatever
up
I am.
straight. Yeah,
I'm a taller person, so yeah,
yeah,
those growth
yeah, and
spurts
long
didn't help.
limbs. You have
Yeah,
long limbs, large hands and feet. So all that
yeah,
stuff eats up large bone structure, musculature, and yeah, you have to eat copious quantities in order to gain any sort of muscle mass, and you work out religiously, and you still stay lean, thin.
hmm
Um, but yeah, that's it. But like the victim shaming, like you blame me. I'm supposed to be the responsible parent and shame me instead of you as a little kid. But little kids don't care about parents because they think you got your entire will, and they know it's on you for not eating. Little kids know this, so
hmm
they're like, man, they're just brutal in their assessment of you and calling you out on it. And obviously you didn't care.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I guess that's the same extent to. I don't remember being bullied for being super skinny. I remember a little bit, not like anything where like I was like traumatized by any means, but people would pick on me for being skinny, growing up. But
yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
But also I know I have a lot tougher skin than a lot of kids growing up. So maybe they were trying to bully me and I just took it as them joking and I just laughed it off. I'm not sure. But
Right.
it's also how I probably ended up with a lot of people just liking me because I would just laugh it off and joke
Right.
about
That has it. Like me, if I think that you're making a dig and trying to disguise it as a joke, it bothers me. And I'm older and I should know better, but I make an assessment of you very quickly. Like that's that kind of thing. Like I don't mind it being a genuine joke. I'll laugh with it, no matter how ugly it is. If I don't think there's any real intent to be nasty, it doesn't bother me. But if I think you're hiding anything under a nasty, anything nasty under some sort of pretext to make it not look that way, it really bothers me as a person. So
I just can't take it that way anymore because I don't care what they think. So
right,
if they're
right.
trying to
And I shouldn't. I didn't when I was younger,
yeah,
but I do now more. It should be the opposite. I'm older and I should care
yeah,
even less. But I
right.
care more than I did when I was a kid. I didn't care anything you said, when I was a kid, and or even up into my 30s and in 40s, not much. And now in my 50s, I'm starting to really like assess why people do, where before, and it's like the opposite. It's really weird. But you can't have victim shaming without victim blaming. Like you got to blame that person in order to try to shame them in the first place. A bully can't shame you unless they're blaming you for your own condition. You know, so
Interesting take on it.
yeah, yeah. So it's just the way that works.
Yeah, yeah. When it comes to fat shaming for the victim shaming part, that goes in hand for sure for victim shaming and victim blaming. On
Right.
the other hand,
And there's really no excuse to do it. Those, people who are overweight, they know they're overweight. They're struggling with it. They have whatever issues they're dealing with and trying not to. They want to, but that for whatever reason, their desire to eat is greater than their desire to not eat. And that's bottom line. And
eventually,
and there's I don't know the reason for it, and they have their own struggle. And I never blamed them. I never did. it just doesn't matter to me. I don't make a judgment on your personhood because you're overweight. Who cares? I don't make one unless you're thin, unless, man, maybe that guy doesn't have enough money to eat. Then I'm like, that's rough. But as far as like, if you're a good or bad person because you're overweight or underweight, that to me is insanity. But I know some people think that. Some people like.
I think you still do. I think everybody does to a certain
I do.
extent.
I don't. I never did.
I promise you, subconsciously, there's a certain amount of value you put on somebody because of the way they hold themselves, right? Like,
I think, yeah, your carriage and your appearance. Certain people do make a judgment.
you're a
Most
slob.
people do for
And
sure.
that goes in with being fat is, you're a slob, so I'm gonna think these things about you.
Yeah, you're irresponsible. You don't care about this.
Yeah, you're lazy. You have a lazy work ethic because
yeah, you have no
whatever.
self-discipline. You have and it's definitely not the case.
No, most of the time it's
usually
not.
super, work oriented. They just don't care. They just eat whenever they think they're hungry, and it's don't
And
care.
that's another thing is as we progress, more people have desk jobs, more people have sit jobs, and they sit and the easy way to get food while working is to get fast food. And that
and it
gets you to get
exacerbates
fat. And then you're sitting all the time, so you're fat because you have good work ethic. So if
and you're immobile. So
you're fat because you work too much, probably.
Yeah, but then the other thing is, well, all you got to do is stop eating; it'll come off. But but it's that you got to eat.
Easier said than done. It's like, hey, quit smoking cigarettes.
Right. But it's worse because you don't have to have a cigarette to live. You do have to eat, so that compulsion's even stronger.
Yeah, that's true.
But so it's stuff. But the blaming. You mentioned an example earlier. We were talking about it before we came on. About victim shaming, and I forgot what it was. Do you remember?
Without hitting the touchy subject, so you don't have to censor anything, I can think of. No, can't think of those.
Well, I say this, and we'll get more towards the touchy subjects because that really is what brings this out. Is like me, I think there's no excuse for RPE. One person on another.
There's no excuse for it.
Yeah, none at all. And they're not to be blamed at all, and they're certainly not shamed for it, because that's still, to me, a shiny line you don't cross. If they say no, it's not going to happen. For that adult encounter, no, it's not going to happen. Regardless of what they're dressed or not dressed like, regardless of what they've said to you, even if they've teased and promised you the moon, once they like, I thought so, but no, not happening. I think we're done.
Let's do so, and it's essentially the same situation. Let's do domestic violence, right? You have a husband that beats you all the time as the most, standard.
Yeah, that's a horrible thing.
Right. And nobody wants that to happen to that person. But them to continuously keep going to that person, they get Stockholm syndrome, they get all these other things.
Yeah, but you see, that's some mental illness that causes those people to do it. And they think they're financially dependent on them, so, and they blame them for not leaving. And especially now when they have so many resources to leave, like the full weight of all the governments will land upon that person for domestically abusing them, especially if they're a man. And that woman has a host of resources to go to and use if they do it. But still, it's not her fault. I mean, there's no way.
And they should, and the government should, and everybody should empathize and sympathize for that person. At the same time, there's going to have to be somewhere, if she won't do it for herself, a friend or somebody's going to have to tell her, hey, stop going there. Stop being with him. Get away from him.
Yeah.
That's some type of victim shaming. That's some type of victim blaming. You have to see some point she has to make the decision.
Well, and you're right. And then I know they won't do that. They're actually trying to help her.
Right.
And we say it's a her. I've known plenty of wives in my previous career abuse their husbands, and nobody wants to talk about it because you're not a man if you can't say something to your wife. But it's crazy how that goes, but you're right. So the idea that that's victim blaming is crazy, but you're right. I've seen them called out in social media where, she doesn't know what she's doing. It's like, I know, that's why I'm telling her, don't do that. Don't go back there.
Right.
It's very obvious he's that way. Don't do it. It's time to leave. And it's really her fault at this point for not leaving because he can't change, and she won't call the cops or
You can only
anything like
change your
that.
own decisions. You can't change his decisions. And the only actions you can take is your own actions.
Right.
So
And it's horrible. And I feel bad
actions.
for mentioning it, but at some point it's their responsibility to make that change and change that victim status.
That's victim blaming.
Yeah,
right there.
yeah. And that's what you say, but that's the popular vernacular for victim blaming. But I don't call that victim blaming, but it could certainly be viewed that way.
And that's the very gray line of victim blaming to me is it's become too far. We've gone too far. It's too far.
Yeah,
We're going to where we can't even say something to help anybody because then we're the bad person. You know what I mean? Like, what are we talking about here? What where there's no progress here then. That person's just going to be coddled and like, oh, it's okay. Anyway, go back to doing drugs and being beaten by your husband. Have a good day. You know, what are we?
You'll figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so different. In the 50s, if the cop showed up and a woman was crying and had a black eye, they'd look at her and go, well, she didn't fix dinner tonight. And, and they'd get in their car and leave. Like, she obviously doesn't need medical attention. Everything's fine. And it's gone to this, and both of them are crazy. They wouldn't. And I say that, and that is not an exaggeration. I know that to have occurred to a couple my parents' age, and the sheriff's department showed up and went, you got to make her listen. I mean, it's crazy, and the people think that didn't happen. I'm telling you, I know that conversation occurred because I was a little kid and I remember it because it was so horrific to me that was a thing.
If I were there now, I couldn't help but just bust out laughing at this. How crazy that is.
Yeah. And I know people are going to call me out and say there's no way. I'm telling you, that definitely happened. That was something that occurred in the real world, which is, I think, the reason why it swung back so far the other way. When now you can't. Somebody's a victim immediately without even actually being a victim. If they claim they're a victim, you just have to believe them. It doesn't matter if there's any evidence. If you say they're not a victim, then you're the problem. Like, okay, is there some sort of evidence for that? Because we're going to take action based on your victimhood. So we need some evidence, because here's a shocker. Many victims lie in order to increase their social value and get stuff.
Well, now they do, for sure, because it's seen as a higher standard of living to be a victim. It's everybody
you're a better person all of a sudden.
Gives you more things. Everybody sees you as the better person because you're a victim.
To me, I don't see that at all. I think it's a horrible thing, but we're going to get you out of this state and put you back on the roads of not being a victim. But it's neither good nor bad, other than the fact it's bad you're a victim, and we'll try to ameliorate that.
Exactly.
But that doesn't mean you're a special person,
right?
Other than you require some help, and that's it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's how it should be. It shouldn't be you now get some social points or however you.
Yeah, that's nuts to me. That's just nuts to me. I'm all for not arresting people who possess drugs. I just take it from them and put them in rehab. Forced rehab. And get them off of it. It's cheaper to do that than it is to throw them in where there's more drugs in prison smuggled in than there is out. And
they get more contacts. You know what I mean? It doesn't help at all.
And now you're hopeless, stuck in prison with nothing to do, but get illicit and willing to do anything for it. Get illicit drugs and take them, because who's going to, take.
What's going to happen to you? You're going to go to prison?
Yeah. What's the worst thing that can happen? More prison. Well, I got plenty of prison already, so whatever. But yeah, I take it from them, put them in rehab. That's simple. And mark them as a drug user. Just everybody knows, instead of a jail sentence, prison sentence, you just now cops running, you're a drug user, so they're going to look for drugs on you and question you about it and put you back in rehab. It's cheaper to do that than put them in prison. Because of all the stuff required.
It really is.
Yeah. I mean, and they clean up. I don't see anybody wanting to be a junkie. I can't stop it, and I'll do anything. I'll not take food to take drugs and do anything else.
Never say never. I'm open-minded about some people just like, oh yeah, I love this life. This is the life to be.
That might be true.
You never know.
Takes all kinds.
Yeah. Some people just this is it. This is what I want to do.
Yeah. So
Yay.
yeah. See, and you know, in my generation, a lot of people my age, especially in the conservative South, still look at junkies as less than human almost. You know,
Yeah.
uh, people who are addicted to drugs is entirely their thing. And sure, when they started, it was their decision, but now they're stuck. And they need help to get out.
Hmm.
And I think that's what society's for, to help those people who are genuinely victims now not be victims anymore and get them down the road to out of victimhood. You know,
Hmm.
but many people would agree. No, we're wasting money on those people, and they can be applied. Let them do whatever they want to do and let them die. I'm like, you know, you can't help people who won't help themselves, but you can try.
Right.
And trying, if they wander off and they refuse it, they're adults. That's on them. But you got to try.
Right. Well,
That's all
you
I'm
go
saying.
into it, you try 100, maybe you get 5 people that will go, and that's 5 more people that aren't on drugs anymore. And those 5 people might know those other people and convince them to come and try it.
Right.
So it helps. I wanted to go back to really define the difference between victim shaming and victim blaming. And you said they go hand in hand. I don't think they go hand in hand in certain situations.
Like
And
what?
um, identities on gay or lesbian or such, and they have a legitimate stake in saying that they were victims, or in some cases still victims in certain areas and groups, but they don't mingle with those people. So, or on Twitter, I guess they get people make fun of them or something, whatever. I'm sure
Yeah.
there are people who still say, like, you they don't like gays or they don't like lesbians, blah blah blah. But to go on the fact of that in itself is victim shaming, but I don't think they're a victim to this day. It's verbal abuse at best, you
Well,
know.
that's victim. I mean, if you're taking verbal abuse, you're a victim of verbal abuse. I mean, you've been caused emotional, and harm, and you don't have to deal with that disrespect to you. Now, again, when I was younger, 70s and 80s, you would get jumped if you were a gay dude.
That's
Dudes would,
legitimate victim. Right.
yeah, it would put you in the hospital. It would be
Right.
more than calling you ugly names.
Right.
But
But I'm just kind of trying to keep it consistent to where we established before, like, somebody saying mean things to you on the internet isn't victimhood. You can just mute them, block them. Don't look at the words. It doesn't
Oh,
matter.
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
It's not a thing.
yeah, I gotta agree. Some harm has to be caused, So
Right.
if your life is not affected by something, there's no harm.
Right.
Then how can you be a victim?
Who cares that you diddly with doodads? No one
Yeah,
cares.
whatever adults do in the privacy of their own,
Yeah. And they
place.
and they make
Who
it part of
cares?
their identity now to then say that they are a victim. They make, you know, their preferences and identity to themselves, which also compounds that victimhood status they want, because it's now, I am a victim and this is me. I am part of this group.
Well,
It's like, okay.
I'll tell you one of the more ridiculous ones that I saw lately, because I'm into reading spiritual stuff and tracking religious things. Just interested in religious history and that sort of thing. And I saw a pagan woman who identified herself as a witch, saying,
Of
"My
course.
people, yeah, my people was tortured and burned at the stake, just 300
Oh,
years ago." And I'm
wow.
like, your people, you didn't know any of those people, and they're not now. So how can you claim nobody cares what you're doing now?
Also, they probably got, well, they were a very low success rate on true pagans. They were probably just grabbing women they didn't like and just burning them.
Yeah, yeah, but the
Like,
idea
who was
was,
really
yeah, they were legit victims. They were kidnapped and burned. You
right.
can't be more of a victim than that. And this person's claiming some sort of victimhood by reading a book about somebody else because they identify with them, even though they're not practicing the same thing in the same era. And nobody cares what they do. Nobody's called them a name. Nobody's said anything, but they're claiming victimhood. So that's crazy. That changes the entire landscape of how you're supposed to interact with people, and it really pulls away what a victim really is. Like, it's trying to
Yeah.
redefine it, and the genuine victims don't get the help they need because everybody just starts to roll their
Yeah,
eyes in their head when they hear it,
the boy cries wolf. Everybody becomes dismissive when you start boo
Right.
hoo, woe is me.
Yeah.
Like,
And
oh,
they're like,
here's another one.
who's doing it? Like you just made up a scenario to try to claim victimhood for social status, and nobody asked. I mean, she volunteered that. Nobody cared. It was in in a forum, and they were doing like nobody even mentioned it to her. And I'm thinking, you didn't know those people. Nobody, and we were reading a thread and like nobody said anything to her. In fact, this was one that supported them. They were talking about other pagans. No, and everybody's, oh, what do you do? And what do you believe? And what's this like? So nobody was saying anything mean to her, and I was like, I don't understand where this came from, why I do that. But she was, everybody goes through phases, and maybe it just outraged her so much she couldn't let it go and had to yell it to everybody. I don't know, on some sort of forum somewhere. Obviously, this was like 10 years ago when people actually still use forums because now they don't. But it was, it was really weird, and that was part of the starting up of victimhood for everybody. Here's victimhood for everybody. Here, we'll give you two, because you're something. I don't know what you are, so you get an extra. And I don't know what's going on with you, but you don't look happy, so you got to be a victim of something. I don't know how that goes, but yeah, this entire thing is just, as a rule, has become ridiculous. I think the fact that we both agree, even though, like I said, we have backgrounds because I helped raise you, and and some, but you definitely don't think like I do in many regards. But it's gotten to the point where it takes away from individuals who are victims and actually need help, and it disperses the potential help too much, and you end up chasing, you know, red herrings when they don't exist. My thing is, and nobody wants to define victim status because it's redefined every few years. You know what that is? It's a moving target.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very mobile these days. Climbing the ladder quickly. I think to really put it together is, you know, we the way you raised me and the way you grew up is people. We viewed the terrible things happening to us and other people were immediately like, okay, we messed up. What did we do wrong here for this to happen? And I think a lot of people aren't inherently taking that into their regiment of life anymore. They're starting to say, that person did these things to me for this to happen to me. Woe is me. And it's like, yes, but you can only control what happens to you yourself. You can really only control what you can do. Yes, terrible things do happen to you out of your control, but sitting there moping about it really isn't helping anything, unfortunately. I wish it
Right.
did,
And
but it
and and
doesn't.
that is true. I've always taken a thing like, yeah, first thing, and that's the thing about in thinking about others, you think about your own actions and reactions. What did I do to contribute to this? If you've done that evaluation and you realize nothing, this person has literally come out of nowhere and started screaming at me and threatening me, and I've done nothing. I haven't walked through anybody's begonias. I haven't been doing anything weird, and they've approached me, with ugly words and threats of violence. Then yeah, like, all right, I'm not going to be,
Yeah, there's
apologetic
definitely
at
space for
all.
that for sure. Like somebody, oh, you're black. I'm gonna do said list of things to you because you're black, and especially in the South. Of
Yeah,
course, that has its own merit of okay, there's only so many things you can take blame for yourself, but on the action of why it's gotten so far and why it's gone too
yeah,
far
and
is
that's,
because
racism is a true victim for no good reason whatsoever, no real reason whatsoever. It's some hateful person's thing in their mind, and they're going after somebody. They're racist, and they're blaming them because they're a different race, which is crazy.
right,
But yeah, and that's a genuine victim. They don't have access to certain things, or they're blaming for other things. They don't, that's a whole different ball game of crazy. And fortunately now everybody realizes that, and tries to say no, no, we're not. Nobody's going to tolerate that. You still got your hateful idiots here and there, but at least they're smart enough to keep themselves under the bridge, like with the other trolls. You know,
right,
they don't come out. But it's and that was genuine victimhood. Because now everybody sees those people who dealt with that real struggle, as being truly noble. And I think people are trying to claim some sort of nobility and struggle too. Like, look what I've overcome. And they didn't overcome anything. And I think that cheapens the people who were real victims and overcome it, which is why you see a lot of people start to roll their eyes and sneer at people who claim victimhood when there's no real victimhood, so,
Right.
They're bringing it upon themselves, which is like double victimhood, double victim shaming, that's, which makes it even worse because they don't understand that at all. That's a whole other layer of something, that they don't get. But yeah, it cheapens people who are victims, which really makes people just despise them,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've run this in the ground as much as we can say on this. And our next talk is going to be on electric vehicles. What's the outlook? What can be done? What's currently going on with them, and where we're going, and how quick this is all happening. I think that we'll touch on that and see examples of it and how it's actually working to how they want it to work, and if the world's ready for it, and why it's not being used as much as they hope. I just saw an article where they go, Americans aren't buying electric vehicles no matter how much everybody tells them to. I think that was pretty much it. Like, well, they are. Some are. I've seen a few Teslas, down here in the city, but it's few. And one thing is, it's tough when you run out of a tank of gas, quote, the electric equivalent of battery juice, and you got to wait 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes to get another full tank. And there's only a few places to do it, other than plugging it at your house overnight. That's tough. It's tough to overcome.
Yeah.
That's just one of the things, but I think it's way worse than that.
There's a whole plethora of problems with this.
Yeah, and one of those things is, why are they pushing it so hard right now when the world's not set up for it? That's a whole other thing. I think the idea of it is kind of cool, but I think they're definitely not ready for it right now. Not even close. But that's a whole other issue. And I thank everybody for watching and listening. And join us next time when we'll have a lot more detail. And please comment, like, and subscribe. And see you later.